Section 1.5, Transformation of Functions. In this section, we'll describe the operations that result in vertical and horizontal shifts of functions, reflections of functions, and stretching and shrinking of functions, and we'll also take a look at function transformations from tables. So I'm going to log into a graphing program called Desmos.com, and we're going to compare the graphs of several functions. The first function that we're going to graph is f of x is equal to x squared. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look and see what happens if we add or subtract a number to the input, in other words, inside the parentheses. So we'll look at f of x is equal to, and then we're going to either add a number in here, or we'll take a look at what happens when we subtract a number in here inside the parentheses. So let's take a look at Desmos and graph some of these functions. All right. So I have some functions listed here, and the first one we're going to graph is f of x is equal to x squared. And you can see that it's the parabola shown in red. The next thing we're going to take a look at is what happens if we were now to add 2 to the input. So let's take a look at the graph of f of x is equal to x plus 2 squared. And notice what happens. The blue graph is the parabola shifted left 2 units. And so when we added 2 to the input, the graph shifted to the left 2 units. The next one I'm going to graph is f of x is equal to x minus 5 squared. And before I turn that graph on, why don't you see if you can predict what you think is going to happen. All right, so let's take a look at the graph of x minus 5 squared. And there it is. So it's the same shape, except now the graph has been shifted to the right 5 units. So when you add or subtract a number inside the parentheses, it shifts your original graph to the left and to the right. So let's go back to our notes and write that in. So we looked at f of x is equal to x plus 2 squared, and we looked at f of x is equal to x minus 5 squared. So adding shifted the function graph to the left, and subtracting shifted the graph to the right. And the number of units it shifted corresponds with this number. So for B, this one was shifted to the left 2 units, and this one was shifted to the right 5 units. So when you add or subtract a number to the input, in other words, inside the parentheses, it shifts your graph right or left. Now what we're going to do is take a look at what happens when you add or subtract a number outside of the parentheses. So f of x is equal to x squared plus, and then we'll compare that with, for example, f of x is equal to x squared plus a number, and f of x is equal to x squared minus a number. So let's go back to Desmos. And so here's our original graph, f of x is equal to x squared. So the next graph we're going to take a look at is f of x is equal to x squared plus 1. So you can see the shape of the graph stays the same, except what has happened is the graph has been shifted up 1 unit. The next graph we're going to look at is f of x is equal to x squared minus 3. And before I turn that on, why don't you see if you can predict what you think is going to happen. So what happens, do you think, if we graph x squared minus 3? All right, let's turn it on and see what happens. Is that what you predicted? So it's the same graph, only this time it's been shifted down 3 units. And so adding or subtracting a number outside of the parentheses shifts your graph vertically up or down. All right, So let's go ahead and record that in the notes. So we looked at f of x is equal to x squared. I think we did x squared plus 1, and I think we did f of x is equal to x squared minus 3. So adding shifts it up, and subtracting shifts the graph down. So we've looked at two transformations so far. The first one we looked at was what happens when you add or subtract a number inside the parentheses, and we found out that that shifted your graph to the right or to the left. And the second one we looked at was what happens when you add or subtract outside the parentheses, and what we saw is that shifts the graph up or down. And now there'll be an opportunity for you to try a few.